Alright, what's up, guys? It's Saki, and we're going to be doing Chapter 14, Stress, Lifestyle, and Health. Let's just get right into it. So, first we have stress. This chapter explores our current understanding of stress, including psychological and physiological natures causes and consequences, stress management, and techniques. What is stress? Stress is a term used loosely to describe a variety of unpleasant feelings, states, frustration, anger, conflict, or conflicted, overwhelmed, or fatigued. Stimulus-based definitions: stress is demanding or threatening to the event and situation. High-stress jobs. Response-based definition emphasizes physiological responses that occur to demanding or threatening situations. Characterized by stress as a response to the environment conditions, neither provide complete definitions of stress. Stimulus-based definitions characterize stress as a stimulus that causes certain reactions, fails to recognize that people differ in how they view to react to challenging situations. So what this is saying is that stimulus-based definitions in a stress basically doesn't emphasize or hold the situation as imperative, while response-based situations emphasize a physiological response that occurs, and it also characterizes stress in certain situations. So stimulus-based basically says that we're looking at something, maybe a snake in a certain situation, maybe a snake in a field that we haven't seen, and we're going to have this stimulus-based reaction that would be exactly the same as if we were to see the snake maybe in a field that's not covered, that you could actually see the snake and it's not as hidden. Whereas response-based says that depending on the situation, you could actually see if there's they would have a different stimulus depending on how the situation or the environment that you're placed in. So cognitive appraisals: stress, a process whereby an individual perceives in response to an event he appraises as overwhelming or threatening to his well-being. The definition places importance on how we appraise, judge, demanding threats, events, stressors, which influences our action. Primary appraisal: judgment about the degree of potential harm/threat to the well-being that our stress might entail. Threat/challenge. So what this is depicting is, this is trying to say that we can depict something as a threat or a challenge. When we depict something as a threat, we're depicting it as something that's detrimental to our credentials, maybe something that's detrimental to our physiological wants, our physiological desires, or something that is just detrimental to like one of the basic amenities that us humans need. And this could cause stress, which could lead to harm and more fatigue and less reactivity with the physiological state. Challenges we can depict as something that we can leap over, something that we have to cross, and something we could go through to actually obtain something greater. Which a challenge, you're going to depict something as maybe like a hurdle to leap over, so we can get to the next side, and you're going to become a better person after you end up leaping over that hurdle, basically. But let's go to the next slide. So cognitive appraisals. What are cognitive appraisals? Stress is likely to result if a stressor is perceived as extremely threatening or threatening with few or no effective coping options. So what this is stating, before I go into it, is it's saying that there's going to be primary stressors and secondary stressors. Primary stressors are stressors with pretty much no other coping mechanisms, so they can be deemed as a threat that may lead to harm, loss, or negative consequences, while the secondary appraisal is potential options that can lower the effectivity of the threat, which can be if secondary appraisal is going to be lower threats and higher threats, which lower threats there's going to be effective options to use, which in higher threatening situations there's going to be more ineffective or just no options in general. So we're going to be looking at something that we're going to encounter. Maybe we encounter a judge from something that maybe we get a bad grade on a test, and it's already done straight. It's already there. It's a huge threat to us, and our secondary appraisal is going to deem this as an extremely high threat because it's already passed. There's no effective options for us to sort of recuperate or try to rectify the grade that we've already got. While if it would be low threat if we could actually redo the exam, restudy for the exam, and try to get more imperative information and try to understand more of the aspects of that exam. So we would deem it as more of a low effectivity or more of a lower threat if we knew that we actually had some sort of option if we got it wrong, which is good because it can increase your motive and it can increase your locus of control, which subsequently increases your want or your feeling that you can do this. You're gonna get that self-efficacy, the motivation that you can actually finish something. And if it goes wrong, then you just have that secondary appraisal, and you know that you have a lower threat, or it's a lower threat because you have more effective options to choose from if you do get that, or if you do fail that exam. My bad, I was drinking. So primary appraisal, we're gonna first demarcate it as a threat and a challenge, and then we're gonna demarcate it as secondary with our secondary appraisal as lower threats and higher threats. So next we have good stress. Yes, there's good stress. Maybe you've heard of eustress before and stress, but eustress is pretty much I'll read it first, but stress that can be positive and motivate us to do something in our best interest associated with positive beliefs, optimal health, and performance. Bad stress causing people to feel burned out, fatigued, exhausted, and performance to decline. So distress is more of that fatigue, more restless. After you've been working out, once you probably hit your third set, you're going to feel that feeling of fatigue. You're going to feel like you've ran out of glucose or you ran out of energy to secrete from all your from your metabolism and catabolizing things throughout your body. But I'm not gonna go through physiological, but you just feel like you're fatigued. You're not getting a sufficient amount of nutrients to your muscles, so you're experiencing stress. Which stress is also physiological, which means that if stress is physiological, it means that it's an excitation within your physiological mechanisms in your organs. So if you get that excitation, that's actually deemed or labeled as stress. Whereas eustress is also an excitation of your physiological arousals such as sweating or perspiration, eye dilation, hypertension, maybe your blood flows, faster heartbeats, things of the sort. So eustress can be more of that gratifying stress. So if you work out, you're going to experience that physiological excitation. You're going to have endorphins. You're going to have a lot of neurotransmitters and a lot of hormones that are being disseminated throughout your body, which that's clearly a higher threshold of stress throughout your body, which is pretty much labeled as eustress. So eustress is more of the positive, good stress, while stress is more fatigue, more of it's going to diminish your feeling, diminish your emotion, diminish your behavior, and it's just overall going to lead to bad situations and things of the sort, and it's going to tire you out, and it's more long term rather than eustress, which is transient. So prevalence of stress is everywhere and plays a crucial role in all our lives. Stress can be evoked in a variety of responses: physiological, accelerated heart rates, headaches, gastrointestinal problems, cognitive difficulty concentrating, making decisions, behaviors, drinking alcohol, smoking, or taking actions directed to eliminating the cause of stress, which will go on more. There's going to be emotional coping mechanisms and problem coping mechanisms, which we'll cover in the future. I mean, we'll cover it in this slide, but it is in the future. But we'll cover the behavioral mechanisms. But obviously, if you're stressed, you're cognitively stressed, you're going to be extremely conflicted, you're going to be convoluted, and you're probably going to be frustrated, like we covered with our in our other psychology video. We stated the aggression theory, which stated that frustration is going to lead to aggression, and aggression is going to lead to displacement, and displacing your emotions on people is going to lead to this sort of cycle of hatred. So yeah, And physiological arousals, like I stated, you're gonna have accelerated heart rates, headaches, and if you're gonna have if you're gonna have that retained sympathetic nervous system, you're gonna end up getting those gastrointestinal problems, which is gonna be things like irritable bowels and things of the sort like that. But we will cover that in the future. Health of psychology is a subfield. Health psychology subfield devoted to understanding the importance of psychological influences on the health, illness, and how people respond when they become ill. It investigates the connection between stress and illness and why people make certain life choices, the effectiveness of interventions aimed at changing unhealthy behaviors, which groups of people are especially at risk for negative health outcomes based on psychological or behavioral factors. National surveys higher stress in women than men, higher levels of stress in those who are unemployed and had less education and less income. Retired people reported the lowest levels of stress in 2006 to 2009, my bad. Greatest increases in stress levels occurred in men, whites, people aged 45 to 64, college graduates, and those in full-time employment. This change was potentially due to the 2008 to 2009 turndown, which was pretty much the internet bubble popped then. So that led to a lot of stress being disseminated around the community and investors. So here are the stress demographic groups. It can go by sex, age, race, education, employment, and income. The chart above, adapted by from Cohen and Janik Deverts, depicted the mean stress level scores among different demographics groups during the years 1983, 2006, and 2009. Stress levels generally show the marked increase over the quarter century time span. So as you see, stress can be sort of predicated upon sex, gender, and age and race, because obviously, like Erickson said, we're most likely going to be going through different stages of life at different ages. Most likely you could receive racist or stereotypical comments based on your ethnicity, and obviously income can sort of accumulate that financial stress and that futurity stress from the thoughts and the ideation of not being able to get that sufficient amount of pay towards a loan, or get that sufficient amount of pay towards bills and necessities. Employment, obviously, if you're not going to get employment, you're not going to reach your physiological functions on the Maslow pyramid. If we don't receive our physiological functions, that's one of the primary amenities. Everything really dives down and boils down back to our physiological wants and functions. With a lot of the things, no education equals no income. No income equals no education equals no employment. No employment equals no income. Age can differ. Obviously, we know that if you're older, you're going to be stressing. Maybe you have hypochondriasis, which is fear of illness. Or maybe you just have hyperanxiety from being around and being in your situation, hyperanxiety from new people, maybe hyperanxiety from schools, colleges. It just depends, and it can also depend on where you were raised culturally. So there's a lot of factors that play into stress. So stress among demographics, sex, men, women. You can see women have more stress than men on average. Less than 25, age less than 25 to 35, 35 to 45, 45 to 55, 55 to 65, 65 and up. So you can see that as they age, it tends to go down, or as you age, it tends to go down from 55 to 64. It goes down heavily, actually. Oh, no, my bad. For actually, when you're less than 25, which is around the age of 18, you're going to be at your peak stress from what this graph depicts. Race, it says that other races actually had the higher amounts of stress. Blacks had the higher amounts of stress after that, and Hispanics were under blacks, and whites had the least amount of stress. So education, less than high school, you can see that the people who don't really have an education tend to be on the lower side of the graph, while people who are unemployed are on the higher side of the graph, while people who are retired are on the lower side of the graphs. And you can see that 75,000 or more people with higher income tend to be on the lower side of the stress graph. So Walter Cannon was actually the person who came up with the fight or flight response. He was the first to identify the body's physiological reactions to stress. He first articulated the name fight or flight response, which he suggests is a built-in mechanism that stabilizes physiological variables at levels of optimal for survival. So a set of physiological reactions that occur in an individual encountering a perceived threat produced by an action of the sympathetic nervous system and the endocrine system. The arousal prepares a person to either fight or flee from a perceived threat, an adaptive response helpful in species survival. So we'll go more in depth with the fight or flight response, which is fight or flight response is just pretty much your sympathetic nervous system. You can pretty much conflate those two together because pretty much they're basically the same exact thing. Fight or flight, sympathetic nervous system. But let's actually say the physiological things that happen when we encounter the sympathetic nervous system. So what happens is our pupils are going to dilate, our heart's going to increase, our bronchioles are going to dilate, our perspiration rate is going to go up because obviously we're having a lot of blood flow, a lot of molecules within our body are getting disseminated rapidly throughout our body, so it's going to cause us to heat up, and obviously we're going to start sweating when we perceive a threat. And respiration is going to go up. You're going to have a lot of that blood being allocated towards a lot of the needed or a lot of the necessities. We're going to need the necessities of the body to help us fight or flight, which is going to be a lot of the adrenal glands, a lot of the oxygen. We're going to need oxygen to disseminate through our muscles, and we're going to have that tensing of our muscles too, so that prepares us to run away, hide, or fight. So next we'll go on to the general adaptation syndrome, which this states that there's a pretty much optimal thresholds for adaptation towards the sympathetic nervous system, which, well, let's just go into it. So Hans Sai, specialized in research about stress, noticed the prolonged exposure to stress caused rats to show signs of adrenal enlargement, thymus and lymph nodes shrink into stomach ulcerations, which I'll go into more. Adrenal enlargement is going to lead to a lot of cumulative. There's pretty much a cyclic pattern that happens with the adrenal glands. It's going to be hypothalamus, from the hypothalamus, pituitary. The pituitary is going to send adrenocorticotrophin hormones to the adrenal gland. And yeah, those are going to start activating even more adrenal glands within the cortex, adrenal cortex, and that's going to disseminate a lot of the adrenal hormones around the body. And so, well, okay, so let's just go into the stages. So first we have alarm reaction, which is the body's immediate sense to adapt. So alarm reaction, you could say alarm, obviously, and when we think of alarm, we think of waking up, we think of immediately waking up, eyes open, or an alarm, we can think of something that's going to engage our sympathetic nervous system because maybe it's perceived as a threat because it's something unknown that we didn't sense before, and it could be a loud sound. So it's just going to wake us up, pretty much put us in that stage of sympathetic, of that fight or flight, not sympathetic nervous system, but it's going to put us in that stage of fight or flight, and then we're going to be prepared to fight or flee. Next is stage of resistance. The body has adapted and readjusted to the stressor, but remains alert, prepared, and prepared to respond to any threat. So basically what this means is we're in the stage of resistance, which is going to be that we're going to be waiting for perceived threats. We're still going to have that sympathetic nervous system activated, and we're going to basically be just watching and sensing if there's anything in our vicinity that we need to run away from, fight, or hide from. Next is the stage of exhaustion. This is when you've been engaging with your sympathetic nervous system or your fight or flight too long, and it sort of inaugurates a stage of stagnation within the body, and it leads to a lot of harmful effects, which we'll go into more. But one of the primary effects it can lead to is heart disease, which is something that has no symptoms, which can be extremely deadly. But we'll go into that more. So here's a diagram pretty much showing how the adaptation syndrome works. So the first is our alarm reaction. We start off with a little hook. It goes down and it shoots up immediately. And then we enter the stage of resistance, which is more of a plateau, more of a straight neutral line. and then we hit that stage of exhaustion, which is that stage of fatigue, that stage that can actually sort of, it can start and it can initiate that those harmful effects on the body that we'll go deeper into. I keep saying we'll go deeper into, but we will go deeper into it. Trust me. There's 46 slides on this slideshow, so we will go deeper. So as I was stating earlier, the sympathetic nervous system triggers arousal responses. So to a stressor via release of adrenaline or adrenaline glands, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal, that's a pretty long word. You could say HPA, but I'm telling you it serves a purpose for hypothalamus, and then pituitary gland, and then adrenal. So what happens is stress, the hypothalamus releases corticotropin releasing factor, which I stated earlier. Corticotropin factor is a hormone that goes to the pituitary, and the pituitary releases ACTH, which is adrenocorticotropin hormone. Well, that's what I stated earlier. But the hypothalamus releases corticotropin, and then the pituitary releases adrenocorticotropin, hormone. And then the adrenal glands release hormones, including cortisol, which cortisol, you probably heard of cortisol. Cortisol is pretty much our primary stress hormone. It's a stress hormone that helps provide a boost of energy when we first encounter a stressor, preparing us to fight or flee. Continuous elevated levels of cortisol, chronic stress weakens the immune system, and in moments of stress, this process can provide energy, improve immune system functions temporarily, and decrease pain. So like we said earlier, this can decrease activation within the thymus, and that's obviously not good because the thymus is one of the primary places that T cell production or yields are created, and that's obviously not good. And decreasing the lymph can obviously lead to bad ramifications like ischemic stroke. You can have a lot of lymph that's going throughout your body. If you have a lot of these lymphocytes, which are white blood cells, if you have a lot of these lymphocytes which are suppressed, which is actually immunosuppression, which we'll get into in the future. If a lot of these white blood cells or leukocytes are immunosuppressed, then you'll be extremely susceptible to bacteria and obtaining a lot of diseases and bacteria in the future if you're stressed, which is obviously going to make you even more docile or more susceptible towards getting a disease and getting weakened immune system and having a lot of that lower nutrients throughout your body, which is ultimately just negative. We just want to avoid stress because it can make us more susceptible to immunosuppression, and we do not want that. So stressors, traumatic events, life changes, hassles, and other stressors. Chronic stressors and acute stressors. So chronic stressors are stressors that are more perpetual, more stressors that are going to have more continuity. This can be things like maybe if you break your leg, you're going to have that acute stress, which is going to be that severe stress, that severe, imperative, dire stress in the moment. And then we're going to have that chronic stress over and over again. It's going to be events that persist over extended time periods. And in this example, it said long-time unemployment. Long-time unemployment can obviously yield abundant stress. Acute stress can be brief events like something that continues to be experienced as overwhelming, as well as even has ended falling and breaking a leg. So acute stressor can be something that's it's brief, but it's extreme. But this falling and breaking a leg can turn into a chronic stressor because it can impair them or impede them from a lot of the daily activities that they encounter and a lot of the amenities that they have to obtain throughout life. So one category of stressors are traumatic events, situations involving exposure to actual threatened death or serious injury. These are things like exposure to military combat, threatened / actual physical assaults, physical attacks, sexual assault, childhood abuse, robbery, etc. Terrorist attacks, natural disasters, and car accidents. Stressors of this type can cause people to develop post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, a chronic stress disorder including intrusive and painful memories, jumpiness, persistent negative emotions, states, among other symptoms. Life changes. So the social readjustment rating scale was pretty much just this rating scale that rated a lot of the things that happen in life. So a lot of these reoccurring natural Sometimes they're inevitable, sometimes they're not inevitable, but a lot of these natural events that can occur through our life for humans, like things like a spouse departing or a spouse death, maybe a divorce, maybe a dead child, maybe a dead sibling, things of that sort. It was pretty much a social readjustment rating scale that saw how we could readjust from a lot of that stress that we obtain through things that happen. So it was a scale consisting of 43 events developed, asking 364 participants to provide a numerical estimate corresponding to how much a readjustment they felt each event will require. Each life or score slash change unit LCU from 11 to 100, representing the perceived magnitude of life change they involve. Death of a spouse is ranked highest at 100, and divorce is ranked second highest at 73. Researchers demonstrate that accumulating a high number of LCUs within a brief period is related to a range of physical illness slash symptoms and mental health problems used to assess the amount of stress in people's lives. Okay. So hassles, what are daily hassles? A lot of daily hassles can be things like commutes. Maybe you end up in traffic. Maybe a kid just insults you. Just a lot of brief moments in life that a lot of people usually experience that can sort of start to you can start to get mad. You can start to get angry and hostile towards a lot of these hassles, and they can cause you to. They're pretty much things that can pretty much aggravate you throughout life. So as these things garner, as these things accumulate, it can cause a lot of stress on you, which leads to a lot of unknown stress. Like a lot of hassles can lead to unknown stress, which obviously we want to get rid of these hassles, and we will talk about how to get rid of a lot of the accumulated stress with hassles in other slides. But let's just go on to the next. So, but let me often lead to negative stress moments can build up, leave us stress frequently of daily hassles is better predict physical and psychological health than life-changing units. So, other stressors, high stress occupations, difficult, demanding, and unsafe work conditions. Occupations contain unpleasant elements, exposure to loud noise, harassment, threats, physical violence, constant frustration. Job strains, work situations that combine excessive jobs, demands, and workload with little discretion and decision-making or job control associated with risk of physical problems. So, obviously, job strain is going to be more of the jobs that you have you don't really have a decision for what you're going to do. So a lot of, like it stated, discretionary. So you're not going to really have an option. You're going to feel like you're going to perceive your job like you really have no choice, and it's going to probably start to get this feeling. You're going to get this feeling of helplessness, and obviously we don't want to have that feeling of helplessness, and it's going to start, maybe if you're a female, it's going to have more of a detriment of this emotion, like anxiety. Anxiety is going to be one of the more greater factors with females, at least, with stress. But job burnout is a general sense of emotional exhaustion and cynicism in relation to the job. So, obviously, if we get job burnout, you don't want to go to the job anymore. You're feeling that sense of fatigue. You're feeling that sense of stress. Obviously, abundant stress and physiological stress are not going to be two things that you want to be compatible. You do not want to have physiological stress, and you do not want to have neural stress, is how I'll phrase it, or psychological stress. But, yeah. So, close relationships with friends and family can be a source of stress. Negative aspects that can cause stress include adverse changes and conflicts, lack of emotional support or confining, lack of reciprocity. So, obviously, in a close relationship, adverse changes, we're going to be stressed to get that readjustment, to try to readjust our schedule, try to readjust a lot of the things that are pretty much normal throughout our life, because a lot of things like jet lag, that's some physiological stress that you're going to undergo, and physiological stress can obviously lead to psychological stress. So, yeah, and lack of reciprocity, we don't want to be stressed. If your partner can reciprocate, most likely going to stress you out. So psychophysiological disorders, stress and immunosystems, cardiovascular disorders, personality types, depression and heart in the heart, asthma, tensions, and headaches. So chronic stress is sustained physiological reactions can lead to wear and tear of the body. Sustained high blood pressure can lead to heart attack or failure. Continuous exposure to cortisol can weaken the immune system, putting a person at risk for infectious disease. Psychophysiological disorders can be tension headaches. Obviously, your arteries and veins in the cranial and more of the cranial area can lead to a lot of that. Can get a lot of hypertension throughout your head and your cranial nerves, and that can lead to tension and the headache. That feeling that you're not getting enough blood flow and that just painful feeling in your head. Asthma can be inflammation and a lot of mucus. Inflammation, a lot of smooth muscle contraction and mucus throughout the arteries. Acne, a lot of oil can be secreted throughout via sebaceous glands. Eczema, inflammation, redness of the skin. You're not going to be getting that nutrients that's allocated throughout your body. Hypertension, if you're obviously disseminating a lot of hormones and a lot of neurotransmission throughout your body, you're going to have that hyper blood pressure. Your heart's going to start beating more and more as you get more angry, and you're going to have a lot of that emotional threshold, or your emotional level, your emotional threshold is just going to raise, and that's going to lead to a lot of muscular contraction with your heart, at least a lot of muscular contraction with your heart, because your heart you're delivering blood around your body, and that's what the sympathetic nervous system does. Irritable bowel syndrome, you're not getting enough nutrients to your bowels, which is going to lead to a lot of solubles being throughout your bowels, and it's going to lead to diarrhea and a lot of this feeling of bloatness, because a lot of the molecules within your intestines are not getting they're not getting catabolized. Well, they're getting catabolized in the right way, and it's going to lead to a lot of these gastric molecules that are going to accumulate throughout your intestines, which is going to lead to that feeling of bloating. So coronary heart disease, that's going to be a lot of inflammation throughout your heart, and that could lead to ischemic stroke and things of that sort. I think. Don't take my word for that. Autoimmune disease. Autoimmune disease is basically, it's actually, there's this disease called lupus, which it's actually when your immune system attacks itself, and your immune system is pretty much attacking a lot of these healthy cells and depicting these healthy cells as antigens, which is going to lead to, obviously, if your healthy cells are dying towards your immune cells, that's not going to lead to something positive. And that's obviously going to be extremely burden. That's an extreme burden on your body, and that's an extreme detriment on your body. Going to lead to a lot of anguish throughout your body, especially when it's healthy cells, not the senescent cells. So immunosuppression is pretty much like I was stating earlier. When your immune system is suppressed due to a lot of these hormones like cortisol, stated in the last chapter, cortisol can lead to immunosuppression because a lot of the hormones in your body are being pretty much released, and when these hormones get released, it pretty much just blocks a lot of the white blood cell production, and we don't want a lot of that white blood cell production being decreased, because that's obviously going to lead to susceptibility to obtain bacteria. And obviously, if we're gonna obtain bacteria, that's not good for our body. That's gonna lead us even down a further rabbit hole in terms of health, at least. So psychoneuroimmunology, this is a field that studies psychological factors that influence the immune system. So this actually pretty much depicts that we actually have some sort of locus of control throughout our body when it comes to immune system and bacterial infection. So this study showed that immune system can be classically conditioned, leading to the idea that if classical condition can alter immunity, then so can psychological factors. Many kinds of stressors are associated with poor or weakened immune system functions. How does the stress weaken the immune system? One way the immune system is weakened through hormones released during stress. These hormones inhibit the production of lymphocytes, white blood cells, important to the immune system, or it's important to the immune response. So, like I'm saying earlier, obviously your psychoneural state is going to have a big part. It's going to have big emphasis on if you're going to be healthy or not, because if you're accumulating stress, you're going to be decreasing your white blood cell production. You don't want to decrease your lymphocyte production. And that's that. I explain that a lot of times. So let's go on to the next. Studies of stress and immune system. 276 health volunteers were interviewed about recent stress experiences. After the interview, they were given nasal drops containing the cold virus. This graph shows a percentage of participants who developed the colds after receiving the cold virus, after reporting having experienced chronic stressors lasting at least 1 month, 3 months, and 6 months. Participants who reported experiencing chronic stressors for more than 1 month were more likely to develop colds than those who reported no chronic stressors. So basically what this is depicting is that a lot of the people who actually were stressed, while the people who weren't stressed were more likely to get this, or more likely, and it actually lasted longer, the disease lasted longer, and they were likely to obtain the cold flu virus disease. And pretty much this is a huge testament to the proof that a lot of stress can lead to immunosuppression, which is going to lead to being more susceptible to getting this bacteria. Next, stress and aging. So research suggests that stress can shorten telomeres, segments of the DNA protecting ends of chromosomes. Shortened telomeres can inhibit block cell division, which includes growth and proliferation of new cells, leading to more rapid aging. This graph shows telomeres shorten in adults and experience with more trauma. So if you don't know what telomeres are these things on the end of chromosomes, and pretty much they serve as these sort of things that allow the chromosome duplication. And telomerase actually help those telomeres extend for a little bit of time, but telomerase usually are inhibited at a certain period of time. And those telomeres, as we age, they shorten. And if those telomeres shorten, it's not going to give us the DNA that we need to be embedded in cells so they can do their proper function, as well as this thing also called epigenomes. And epigenomes pretty much distinguish the thing that these cells need to do. So a blood cell obviously is going to go to the body, go throughout the body and deliver nutrients. And a white blood cell, if you're going to deliver this epigenome, it's going to obviously deliver the instructions to protect the body and fight off bacteria. So next, cardiovascular disorders. The cardiovascular system plays a central role in stress response, making it a key focus in studies of psychophysiological disorders. Heart disease, a cardiovascular disorder, a major risk factor for heart disease and hypertension. So we know hypertension is high blood pressure. This can be caused by stresses including job strain, martial conflict, natural disasters, forces the heart to pump harder, and thus putting physical strain on the heart. It has no symptoms. This can lead to heart attack, stroke, or heart failure, as well as kidney failure and blindness. Both heart diseases and hypertension also have been linked to negative affectivity. Negative affectivity tends to experience distress emotion states involving anger, contempt, disgust, guilt, fear, and nervousness. And if you didn't know what affectivity versus effectivity was, which I didn't know, affectivity was more of influence, and effectivity is more of the reaction towards something. So you're gonna have a lot of that incentive to more feel these more neurotic emotions like anxious, contempt, disgust, guilt, and fear. So, well, we got through this a lot. So, pretty much heart attack symptoms, lightheadedness, nausea and vomiting. I'm not sure the difference between lightheadedness and nausea and vomiting, but perspiration, shortness of breath, chest pain and pressure, back and neck pain, stomach pain, anxiety, dizziness, and shortness of breath. So both of them have shortness of breath. Both of them pretty much have this lightheadedness or nausea. Both of them have a lot of pain in the upper regions of the body, a lot of the dorsal regions of the body, obviously not the head. So back and neck pain, chest pain and pressure, maybe angina, stomach pain, and they experience, instead of stomach pain, they experience just back and neck pain. But really, females the main thing they experience that's different from males is anxiety, but they do also experience no perspiration like males do, and they experience different pain areas. Instead of just the just chest, they experience pain in the back and neck. So types of personality, type A and type B. They discovered people with prone heart disease think and feel and act differently than those who are not. So I don't want to say type A and type B is more of a dichotomy. There's probably more of a spectrum to type A and type B. You could probably be intertwined between a little bit of type A, maybe a percentage of type B. So type A is pretty much, I distinguish type A as anger, or you could say anger or aggression. Type A are more competitive. They're more hostile. They're more impulsive. They're more ready to get stuff done. They're gonna be that person who wants to get stuff done right now, stat. Type B is more of the basic person. I say they're type basic, meaning like basic, like neutral. They're gonna be flat. They're gonna be, well, I perceive their emotions as flat. They're not obviously gonna be flat, but it's more of a flat. Like looking at an electrocephalogram, you're gonna see like zigzags and stuff like that. But I think they're like flat, neutral in emotion. But they tend to be relaxed, laid back. They tend to wait, and they're pretty neutral, pretty apathetic, pretty phlegmatic. They're gonna be more of those people who are more tranquil, while the type A is gonna be more the person who's more hostile, more angry. Type A is gonna be like, let me think. Type A is gonna be like a boss. Type A is gonna be like a boss, and then type B is gonna be like maybe your calm and collected, chill grandmother. So transaction model of hostility. This actually is just like the what is it? The aggression theory, which states that but this states that anger and hostility appear to constitute to long-term risk factors for adverse outcomes. Why? According to the transactional model of hostility for predicting social interactions, the thoughts and feelings of hostile persons promote antagonistic behavior towards others, which in turn reinforces complementary reactions from others, thereby intensifying one's hostile disposition and intensifying the cyclic nature of these relationships. So what this states is that there's going to be a cyclic nature between someone, which is going to lead to dispositionalism, which is going to be relaying of anger onto another person. And if you're going to constantly relay anger onto another person, we obviously know that's going to lead to a lot of emotional excitation. A lot of emotional excitation is going to lead to a lot of that cardio-muscular area being worked, and we don't want our heart being worked too hard, because that's going to lead to maybe our blood vessels are going to get damaged, which is going to lead to plaque buildup, and that's going to lead to maybe spasms or ischemic stroke, which is going to lead to a lot of nutrients not being disseminated or diffused throughout the body, and we don't want that. So obviously, point blank, if you're in a relationship, don't be mad at each other. Just be mad. Just be calm and collected. And if you have to displace your anger on a punching bag, man. Because that punching bag is innate. I mean, in some perspective, it's innate. But I won't go into that. But, it doesn't have life in the way we depict it. So it's innate. Just punch a punching bag, or if you need to, exercise. Those are some good ways to release stress. That's sublimation. Just please do sublimation. I'm telling you, sublimation is better than a lot of other ways to display stress. So research suggests that a relationship exists between depression and heart disease. One reason is that it seems to people diagnosed with depression as children have been found to be more likely to be obese, smoke, and be physically inactive. Depression increases likelihood of living unhealthy lifestyles and heart disease. So we know that if the person's most likely depressed, they're going to be extremely stressed. They're going to be more in that sympathetic state, which also, if they're in that sympathetic state, it's going to make them feel fatigue, and it's most likely going to make them feel even more sad because they feel like they're a lump and they can't do anything and they can't get up, and they're just in their room rotting pretty much. So obviously, if they're rotting in their room, they're going to feel more fatigue. They're going to feel more feeble, more meager, and it's going to lead to obesity. Maybe they'll use eating as sublimation. Maybe they'll use smoking as sublimation in a way, but that's not really sublimation. Smoking is just pretty much a defense mechanism we use to reduce stress, but it's not socially acceptable. Physically inactive. If you're depressed, most likely you're not going to want to go outside. If you're obese, you're not going to want to go outside because you're going to perceive yourself, or you're going to have that you're gonna have you're gonna have low self-esteem, which is gonna make you perceive yourself as low, as meager, as you're gonna think you're the center of attention because you're just so disgusting and so erratic and so grotesque that people are just gonna say, "Oh, you're disgusting. I don't even want to look at this man." That's how you're gonna perceive yourself. That's how most people perceive themselves in that moment. So, asthma is a chronic disease in which airways become inflamed and narrow and leading to difficulty breathing. Psychological factors play important roles in asthma. Studies show that some people with asthma will experience asthma-like symptoms. They expect to experience symptoms like people with asthma report to display high levels of negative emotions, anxiety. Asthma attacks have been linked to periods of emotionality, exposure to stress, and stressful experience has been linked to the development of asthma throughout the lifespan. So, like I was saying earlier, this is what happens during asthma. This is the normal bronchial airway. It's obviously surrounded by a lot of smooth muscles. You're gonna have these endothelial, a lot of endothelial skin, or a lot of endothelial cells. My bad, endothelial cells or endothelial tissue wrapped around these airways. And what happens is pretty much a lot of the smooth muscle ends up getting contracted, and it ends up getting inflamed, which is going to narrow the airways, and it's going to also have a lot of mucus going through the airways. So you can see that this bronchial is extremely constricted and extremely occluded, making it so a lot of oxygen can be pushed throughout the body, and if it doesn't arrive at those alveoles, which are the things that pretty much exchange the gas intake from oxygen and pretty much just send it throughout the blood. So if you're not getting that oxygen and that gas that's being disseminated throughout your body, which is our nutrients, then you're not gonna be a pretty healthy human, pretty much. So next is coping styles, which I said earlier will go on. Problem-focused coping and emotional-focused coping. Individuals attempt to manage and alter their problems causing experiences of stress. It involves identifying the problem, considering problems and solutions, weight of the cost, benefits in these solutions, and selecting an alternative, proactively addressing the problem. More likely to use the stressors that is perceived as controllable. Emotional focused coping, efforts to change and reduce negative emotions associated with the stress. This can include avoiding, minimizing, or distancing oneself from the problem or positive comparisons with others, or seeking something positive in a negative event. Treat symptoms of stress, not the cause. More often used for stressors we feel powerless to change. For you are stressed, you are failing a class. A lot of these are just. So this is an example, but I'll give my example after I read this. So problem focus, study more, contact a professor, find a tutor. Emotional focus, watch a movie, play games, distract yourself from the problem. So emotional focus is going to be more of the distraction. A lot of us like to distract ourselves from maybe the problem that we did. It doesn't have to be getting a low grade on an exam. Maybe we indulged in cheating or something. So we like to distract ourselves, or we like to compensate by being nice to someone. And usually, or we like to distract ourselves or indulge in helping somebody. And this is pretty much just more, I like to say it's more of an external coping mechanism. It's not direct, whereas problem solving mechanism is directly on the problem. See, like a problem focused coping mechanism. Well, in the example I explained, I couldn't really give a problem focused mechanism. Maybe just try to speak to people and handle your problems with cheating. I can tell you that, but if we are speaking on the example that the slideshow gave, the example on getting a lower grade, you can contact your tutor, email your tutor, maybe ask for some advice, ask for feedback, maybe get a study partner, help somebody study, maybe even watch videos or watch lectures while you're even just having a good, or going throughout your normal day, doing your normal task or quest. So next, control and stress, perceive control, the ability to enact control in our lives. A basic tenet of human behavior, our reactions to potential stressors depend largely on how much we control how we behave. Our beliefs about our personal capacity to exert influence shapes our outcomes. It has majority implications of health and happiness. Greater personal control is associated with better physical mental health, greater psychological well-being, lower reactivity, and stress in daily life. So let's move on to the next. So, in this experiment, learned helplessness. This was by Slayman. Martin Slayman or Selman. Excuse me if I say that wrong, but pretty much it was an acquired belief that one is powerless to do anything. In Slayman's experiments, dogs were placed in the chamber where they received electric shocks, which they could not escape. When they were later given the opportunity to escape the shocks, they most seemed to give up, and they did not even try. They had acquired learned helplessness. Selman believed learned helplessness to be possible, capable of depression. And by the way, if you're more of if you're more on the ethical side, more the ethical dilemma on this, the shocks he received were not major or were not strong. They were small shocks, but I mean, obviously it was a test, so he had to have some slight pain for him to realize that, or for psychologists to realize that there's this thing called learned helplessness, which is in a lot of depressed people. If you feel that you don't have that locus of control, you're not going to get that motivation. You're not going to have that self-efficacy. And if you don't have that self-efficacy, why even bother taking the first step to try to prohibit or try to reduce or try to impede those beliefs that you already have? So social support. Social support is the soothing impact of friends, family, and acquaintances. This can involve advice, guidance, encouragement, acceptance, emotional comfort, tangible assistance. It provides comfort when faced with life stressors. Psychosocial effects affecting health outcomes. Individuals with stronger social relationships have 50% greater likelihood of survival compared to those with weaker social relationships. Research suggests that social support boosts immune system and reduces blood pressure. Stress and reduction techniques, exercising, relaxation techniques, and biofeedback. Biofeedback techniques are actually some sort of electric apparatus that displays the involuntary movements of your body, which gives you sort of control and gives you that recognition on the involuntary movements or the involuntary muscle contractions throughout your body, which obviously if you can recognize those involuntary movements and involuntary contractions, you can have more locus of control and you can realize how to sort of subjugate or how to manipulate those involuntary movements and things like that. So relaxation techniques, obviously, if we're going to be releasing and we're going to feel like we're disseminating, we're going to feel like we have that oneness with nature, we're going to feel more relaxed. It's going to make us engage and indulge in that in that parasympathetic nervous system, which that will obviously corroborate our health if we're indulging in that parasympathetic nervous system. And yeah, we us humans, we want peace once in a while. Exercise can lead to things like angiogenesis, which is creation of new blood vessels, which if we have new blood vessels, that gives us more routes for nutrients to travel, which is obviously a great thing. Exercising can also lead to more sweat glands and more perspiration, which is going to lead to a better, more modulated level of homeostasis, and that's going to be obviously good for us. And a lot of other things come with exercising. You could have a lot of things like maybe your cardio can increase. Obviously, that heart contractions will increase. You're going to be increasing blood better. You're going to have better resting heart rates and things of the sort. You're going to have lower occluded blood vessels from losing the fat or losing excess fat if you have excess fat. So the pursuit of happiness, pleasant life, meaningful life, and good life. So good life is using skills for enrichment. So this could be maybe drawing, maybe exercising. Pleasant life is enjoying daily pleasures. So maybe daily pleasures like eating, maybe even sleeping, maybe walking outside. Maybe your daily pleasure is exercising. That's one. Meaningful life, contributing to a greater good. What's career? Maybe picking up trash. Maybe helping animals. Obviously, if you're allocating some sort of time to your career in the future, you're going to be allocating some sort of merit to society because you're allocating some sort of money to society, which is going to obviously lead to a lot more support throughout a lot of people throughout the economy, which a lot of social security. If you're having a job, if you're obtaining money, and if you obtain money, it's gonna end up circling the economy. We're not in finance, but you know. You're going to have some sort of merit to society. And if you're a scientist, you're going to have a lot of merit to society. But you're still going to have merit either way. So average person in the world tends to be relatively happy. Surveys of residents in over 150 countries indicate Denmark was the happiest place of citizens in the world. Americans ranked 17th happiest country to live in. So what are the factors that impact happiness? Family, money, religion, and culture. Probably don't really need to go deep into this. If you have family, you have kinship and bonds. And obviously, if you have those kinships and you have those bonds with your family members, it's going to lead to a lot more joyful moments, which is going to lead to less stress. Money is going to lead to less stress, not having to worry about those primary necessities that we need to obtain. If we don't have to worry about procuring those average necessities, those conspicuous necessities that we all need, like shelter, sex, and things of the sort, then we're not gonna have that much stress. Religion can be maybe having something to lead on, maybe having something to depend on when you die, or having a source. A lot of people in poor countries have more dependency on religion than a lot of people in richer countries. So this can also lead to alleviation of stress. My bad. So life events and happiness. People who are poor are predicting the intensity and duration of their future. Emotions. Events might initially cause an intense surge of emotions, but eventually adapt to changing emotions and circumstances. For a life, dramatic life events have much less long-lasting aspects to happiness than might be expected. Long-suffering Chicago Cubs fan would no doubt feel elated in their team won a World Series Cup. In a way, they are similar to those who play the lottery, rightfully thinking that choosing the correct numbers and winning millions would lead to a surge of happiness. However, the initial burst of elation following such elusive events would most likely erode with time. So what this is saying is that happiness pretty much can erode with time. So lifestyle and life events and happiness. So this graph shows that the satisfaction scores of several years before and after 3 significant life events represent the year in the event happened. Diener al. 2006. Despite the idea of the life event, they do not permanently alter the people's general levels of happiness. Those findings suggest that the long-term happiness levels can change for some people. So after this event happens, or after this event occurs, it pretty much can alter stress levels. But usually after the event occurs, years later, they can get that sustained stress level back. So, positive psychology. Selman urged psychologists to focus more on understanding on how to build human strength and psychological well-being. Positive psychology seeks to identify and promote qualities that lead to greater fulfillment, well-being, satisfaction, hope, optimism, happiness, capacity for love, courage, interpersonal skills, aesthetic sensibility, perseverance, forgiveness, compassion, originality, future-mindedness, and spirituality. So qualities that help promote psychology and well-being are linked to many favorable health outcomes: positive affect, pleasurable engagement with the environment such as happiness, joy, enthusiasm, alertness, and excitement, and optimism. And we know what optimism is, associated with general source of connectedness, emotional practical help, and adaptive coping mechanism, lower depression. So obviously what this is saying is if you indulge in more effective, more happy things throughout the environment, it can give that cyclic nature, and you can have that cyclic happiness, and you can become a more optimistic person. So flow, last but not least, flow. We experience flow in a game. It's pretty much having that just complete oneness and just that complete conflation with the thing you're interacting with and yourself. So the only thing you're focused on is you and that thing you're doing. So you could have focus on the game. Maybe you feel like you have that flow, that complete oneness, and you're just like achieving like that fictitious MUI or something. But yeah, that's how I depict flow. But okay, that will be the last slide. I hope you guys enjoyed. This was an hour long. Thank you so much for listening to my lecture. Have a good day. Peace.